We are rebroadcasting Baxter Wellmon's presentation from June 10th, 2023. Baxter is giving a presentation on the cemeteries in Bloomfield Township and all the interesting facts about our founders and veterans. Thank you, Baxter, for being here.
All right, well, thank you. And it's a pleasure being here today. And I very much appreciate you coming. Not too many people will take an hour of their time to talk about cemeteries, dead people, but why not? Oh gosh. Well, generally, the second slide here is really speaking about what we're talking about today is the primary cemeteries in the township. And you'll see on the slide the circles, yellow circles represent our top subtopic today. We're going to take each cemetery separately and give a little bit of history about it, the importance of that particular cemetery, and some pictures of it, give you an idea. So I kind of like to do that just for my own bearing. But you can see on this, just as an indication of this slide, that when the township was formed, it really, well, the Crawford County was 1800, but our township pretty much settled around Canadohta Lake. Back then, it was called Oil Creek Lake, and prior to that, Washington Lake. So got quite a history. So it was sort of around that lake, the first settlements within 5 miles, 3 miles of the lake, and also the streams. If you go close to all these cemeteries, you'll see that they're not far from a creek. So, and that's just a natural thing. They don't have to, dig out a well. They didn't have people to drill like they do today. So, but so with this as a beginning, let's move to slide 3. In this particular slide, I brought some notes with me on this. I sometimes can't remember some of these, but back even in 1880, in all the 13 states or commonwealths, there was 1,783,000 people living in our country. And of course, much less back in 1800 or prior to, and they didn't really take any real surveys prior to 1776 or 80. But the important thing here is, it leads into this slide, is that particular year, there was 35,292 deaths in our country at that time. And that's 1880. It was more than 13 colonies by then. But, this slide kind of speaks, and you'll see I have 1880 on this slide. It speaks to why roughly 2% of our population at that point in time each year died. Well, the sad part about it, the births, live births, was almost the same as the deaths. There was 35,292 deaths, and there was 44,217 births.
Wow.
Okay, now that's roughly 9,000 less than the deaths. But what happened was, I'm sorry, more than the deaths. But the first year of those babies that were born, within the first year, by the end of the first year, 7,000 of those births died. In the second year, 2,000. By the second year of all those births, ended up more than just slightly more than the deaths. Okay, not even a 1% increase. So what happens back then, I'll get onto this here in a minute in this slide. These causes that I have on this slide, as you can see, basically explains what happened to us during the 1800s and 1700s. We had a very difficult time increasing our population in our country. The only way in which the population grew was mostly immigration. Folks coming in, particularly in the 1800s, there's all kind of reasons why, from Europe, Ireland, phantoms and wars and etc. in New York. So it really, sometimes we're talking now about, the immigration is like 6 million more in a couple of years. Back then, the United States depended on immigration because consumption, or TB as we know it, tuberculosis, was most likely, it was during the 1800s, the major cause of deaths in the United States. Generally, it touched 1 in 7 of the population in the United States, tuberculosis. There was no cure for it. And all these, the typhus, inflammation, flux, not flux, that's due to contamination of water and food, and etc. Those sprays, but scarlet fever, cholera, all these others that's on this list is due to virus, bacteria, basically bacteria. So why are we dying from bacteria? We had no antibodies given to us. It wasn't until the late 1880s that they even found out what the cause was of all these diseases. So here we go again. In our township, we had a very difficult time going at this. And I'm going to speak to the history, how we developed. But I just wanted to load into why we're talking about the cemeteries. The fact is, we had a very difficult time getting going as a township. Meadville, for example, started a few years before our township was founded, but they too had the same issue going on. But they had one more issue, is the Native Americans. it basically wasn't until the late 1790s that they were safe. They had a fort there. Well, they had a blockhouse, they called it, 2 floors, cannon on the top. When the word got out that, you know, there's a group coming of Indians, they all ran into the blockhouse. To me, that's crazy because it was made out of wood. You know, they set the darn thing on fire, but that never happened. But just to give you a little background, they had one more thing going, is that. Now, some of these here, if you had a splinter, for example, in your hand, and you didn't get it all out, you could die from that. So that's part of the cause, but I try to identify the major ones on this. So, and I won't ask for questions on this one, but let us move to the next slide. And this is very difficult to see, but I just wanted to point out, excuse me, that the first sub map or diagram, you'll see our Commonwealth was really partially owned by Connecticut, the northern part. Southern part was mostly owned, a sliver owned by Maryland. And the southwestern part was owned by Virginia. So, and that plays a part going forward here in a minute. But so, as we began our journey, it was not really for us. What really got us to start here in our township is basically in 1794. There was a major battle in Toledo against a confederation of Indians that was part of the Iroquois and part of the Huron and etc. They lost that battle. Keep it simple. That's another discussion another time. But the Indians lost that battle. That was August of 1794, and just devastated the Confederation of Indians. So America basically won the right of the Northwest Territory, major territory that ran almost to the Mississippi, northern part of the country. So the Indians in 1795, January 1795, had to sign a treaty that turned over, if you look at the area in yellow here, it says 1784. Well, that's what started, but it wasn't signed until January of 95. So once that was signed, the only part that didn't go was the Iroquois insisted on keeping a section of New York, now New York State, but the triangle in Erie, our little triangle of our Commonwealth. The Indians kept that because that wasn't part of the treaty. So, Lord and behold, Erie County, as we know it now, was under constant raid. But we were safe here. We were too far south of their territory, and by then they realized that they fooled around with us too much. They might get a couple thousand of our troops up there and beat them up, I guess. So here we go. In 95, we had some of our first 1796 immigrants pioneers into our county. The word got out in to a gentleman called Thomas Bloomfield and his family that, hey, the land is good, plenty of water, forest, lots of trees and etc. And the half of our, but by then they were cutting up our territory that the federal government had to reward the soldiers of the revolution, grant them some land, because government didn't have any money back then, or very little money. So the southern part of our township, down by Riceville, across the southern border of our township, some of the revolutionary soldiers got some land, and usually that depended on your rank. The privates got, as always, nothing, and no, they did get something. But anyways, so off we go. 95, no one really moved into our township. They mostly went to Meadville. Colonel Meadville, a personal friend of George Washington, came in strong during that period. He brought a lot of his fellow revolutionary partners and families, and he really started to develop civilization down there. And that's their creek was really a river. It's what they call it, French Creek, but it was more navigable than, of course, our thing here. So along came Thomas Bloomfield and family. 1797, he sent his oldest son and wife to explore and see if it was right to bring the whole Bloomfield family up here. So they arrived late in 1797. Very much in if you go up the Lake Road here, where the burial ground is, that was part of their land, but they had ultimately extended several hundred acres or more there. It's very difficult to find out exactly, because we weren't a county yet. We weren't Crawford County. So all the records were kept down in Allegheny County and another county, and as they started to develop more counties in our Commonwealth. But he was quite wealthy. He was from New Jersey. His wife was a Morris, who helped finance the revolution in Philadelphia. And so he got word back to his father that, yes, come. Now, his wife was the first white female in our township. So 97, late 97, 98, Thomas Bloomfield came with his pack of family, which was quite large. And he settled here, and soon after, a gentleman, Richard Shreve, came into our township. he had settled with his family. His father basically took him from New Jersey to the Virginia land, because his father was a aide to George Washington, and his George said, "I've got a mill up there in this land up in, wasn't called Pennsylvania then, but this little section of Virginia." He says, "You go up there and run that mill, and you just pay me some type of a fee, and you go up there and take care of it." So, well, this guy thought, well, geez, oh yeah, and there's outbuildings. There was actually a decent house that was built there. And the Shreve family from New Jersey, now you have to understand, this was right after the war, Revolutionary War, so yeah, that was like the war was over in 1783, and they came up early here in the 80s, but down south, down by Fayette and County and Washington County in the southwest corner of our state. And there we go. Now you have to understand, there was no roads. It was basically a trail, because well, it was basically started as an Indian trail, but it ended up being a trail for people that wanted to settle in that corner, because the Indians didn't have that corner. If you look at this slide, it's kind of gray area, and that's where they headed. So took them 23 days to get there on 3 wagon loads of personal goods. The women basically had to walk the whole way between New Jersey, okay, and south of Pittsburgh. You know, people were rugged back then. So we have to understand, there was no roads out here. It was wilderness. You know, you had your bears and panthers and everything imaginable out here. And so they also decided, after the Indians lost that battle and signed a treaty giving up this land, we want to go up there, because we can get some government land, and we heard that it's very fertile. So they came up. They basically came up in 1798, 99, pretty much with Bloomfield. They knew each other. So that was really the next family that really showed up here, that even today, the Shreve family is, prolific up here, so, and it's wonderful. And all right, so that's kind of how the very, very beginning of our township. I'd like to go to one more slide, slide 5. And there, I know when I say there's no roads at that point in time, this map is about the same time period. It's about 1800, this map. And you can see there's no roads going out there. There's several mountains, ranges, Allegheny Range, running north and south, and other terrible, the Shreve family, when they came here, had a very difficult time getting over them. But there's nothing up here. what is up here is a fort called Franklin, which turned into a city south of us. That was it. And Erie was still Indian territory, so, you know, even though the French had a outpost up there and in Waterford, you know, they had to stay inside their fortifications, for sure. Let's move to slide 6. 6 is basically the beginning of our existence. You can see on this, there's not much here. You have Riceville. Now, Riceville was formed by a Samuel Rice, who also got some land down there because being in the southern part. He formed that little village, which grew substantially in the township. In fact, at one time, Riceville had as many population within say a mile radius of the township borders, and had as many in that town as the whole township.
Wow.
So it had a separate, you know, designation. Of course, when they took that village into the township population, it raised it back up to, we're talking a couple thousand. You can see here again, there's a couple roads now, north to south, major road that's going east and west. You get down to Meadville, and then there's a couple punching out there. And it's, you know, 30 years later, you had a canal system put in that almost, you know, took it up and by Meadville. But so our township at the beginning was sparsely settled. And what was the profession in most of the population? Well, it was farmers. That's the bread and butter of our township. And I haven't looked at it recently as far as the production out here, but I'd venture to say it's probably the same. And so the people that moved in here, the pioneers, they were truly pioneers. They came here, they didn't have houses to start with. They had tarps and stuff, you know, over wagons. And some of them, they all walked here. Most of them, unless you had money, you couldn't afford a wagon to get here. You walked. And like this, you know, I was talking about the Shreves. I mean, they lost one of their children coming on the walk. It was, you know, just shy of a month to get here. So I use that as an example. Everyone that came from here, whether it be Connecticut or Philadelphia, New York area, New York City area, or New Jersey, a large percentage of them walked. I couldn't find the background for Bloomfield as far as his travel here, his family, unfortunately. Maybe it's somewhere. I'll find it if it exists at some point. But I suspect they had more than walking because they were in those times, fairly well off. So, and here again, Canadohta Lake was, you know, in this is called Oil Creek Lake. And that's just the way it is. Well, the next slide, which is 7, kind of hones in on the lake. And even back then, same map, back then, you notice no one's on the lake. There's no house on the lake. Not one. No hotel, no bar, no, no. I'm sure they fished and hunted there, but just to give you an idea, and going into the 19th century, it wasn't until after 1850 that there was a building on the lake. The closest we could tell when the Shreves came, Richard Shreve's family, one of his sons got a mill that's just on the inlet of the lake. I tried to look up the deeds and stuff, but there again, back then, it's sort of like every person's on their own, You put a stake in the ground and that's your property. Take it from me. So, we were quite primitive here into the late 1850s. And maybe we can all remember down to Titusville, what happened down there. Oil was discovered. All right, well, brought tremendous wealth. And of course, Titusville, just south of our county, but many of the men would go down there that was in our township. And a lot of the families suffered because they thought they were going to get rich. Well, they didn't get rich because the people who got rich were the ones that owned the wells. And so, there was a lot of turmoil going on in the 1860s, 1870s of our township here. Farming production substantially fell. Well, during that time from, we started in 1798 to the, going up to 1860s and 70s, our population suffered tremendously because why? Of disease and accidents go on. A lot of men went south to work in the oil fields and etc. That still goes on today in a lot of aspects. Geez, 100 years later. So anyways, the homes that our people had were usually one room. You had a loft that was on, that to sleep on, etc. Wood burning, usually fireplace back then. They couldn't afford anything else. They were lucky to have a window. So, but close proximity, large families. One, they were stillborn. They died early. The first 5 years was substantial. They lost many of their children through disease. Why? Because they were close together. Death was substantial. Death was just around the corner, I guess you could say. So there was a lot of suffering going on of our pioneers. This was not easy. We take all that for granted in this township. Yes, finally, they had in that, mid 1800, they did have 2 doctors in our area, one in Riceville and they had one in Lincolnville. So we were fortunate in that. But doctors back then, if you got any of these diseases, they bleed you. Back then, they would give you crazy, medicine and all. It was bad, So there's, they did not go to, a lot of them did not go to medical school, at least in our township. So moving on to the 8th slide here, you can just get a sense of our growth starting here. And one thing's important, there is something that really helped our township out is in the 1880s and 1890s, the wealthy individuals down in Titusville decided, hey, that lake up there, no one's using it, and I don't think no one has any rights to the lake. Let's go up and claim it. So up they went, and they built a dam at the outlet where the current dam is, and Lord and behold, they said it wasn't a natural lake, it was a man-made lake. So we can claim it, file a courthouse claim, and we'll build a hotel there for the rich, not for, the common folk, like farmers. And we're gonna build a railroad up there. We're not gonna, ride those miles in a wagon. No cars back in that time period. So they helped fund a railroad from Titusville. And which happened to have one water tower with steam locomotives, of course, at the southwest end of the lake, almost across from where their makeshift wooden dam was built. And so there was a stop at Lincolnville, and all of a sudden the population of Lincolnville took off. They had a hotel, a huge hotel there, all kind of stores, and barbershop, and it was truly a town at one time. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't know it today, but it was big. Riceville, boom, same thing, because now they could get the products in and out without having to, go to back at that point. Erie was established, Erie or Pittsburgh. So, guess what? They grew substantially. Very profitable. And of course, during the 1920s, the gentleman Benjamin Russell's, he said, you know what? You don't own that lake, you barons. We're going to start using it. Well, all of a sudden, there was a shooting war went on. The oil folks hired some people with guns, and well, you don't mess with farmers, particularly from around here. And there was a few skirmishes, but Ben finally won the case, and that's not a private lake. It's, that dam was just, back then it was a wooden dam. That was just put up. That's been there long before anybody even settled here. Mm-hmm. So he opened that up for us, and also gave us a parcel of land that right up to the lake for the public. And so he was very instrumental. Now he was a Riceville man, fairly well off. He had a store there and well respected. So, that's But the township at that point was extremely prosperous. The farmers were making out. Along came the car. And the car put the railroad out of business. And guess what happened? Our population plummeted again. Because the people, you know, we had Riceville was just loaded with making, oh my God, clothing, just all kinds of plants. In fact, they even had a refinery in Riceville, believe it or not. So all that went away. Riceville went away, Lincolnville went away. On Shreve Ridge, the Shreve family, there was several plants up there, call them factories or plants, that made cheese, several cheese factories. And I'm saying, you know, big time. This, you know, they just didn't make cheese for their neighbor type stuff. They ultimately had to go out of business because how they got the cheese out was basically on the railroad, one, and the cars just, things changed. Not that it's good or township. Oh, before the railroad was pulled on the lake, a hotel was built. That hotel was originally, the first one burned down. And we think it was doing that, you know, disagreement between the farmers and the oil people. But the second one stood for quite a few years, but people in Titusville were coming out vacationing there. Yeah. So we'll move on a little bit. Just another pictures of the railroad, 9 and 10. I'm going to go through these quick just to let you know what ended up the railroads. The railroad that brought the tourist business up ended up in the 1920s was they tore up the railroad north of the lake stop. And the lake stop was right near the hotel. So that was open for a while. But with the car coming in, that died, and they finally tore that up down to Tyronville. All right, now let's get into the subject. Riceville Cemetery, slide 11. You'll see when you go visit the cemetery of Riceville, very nice sign on the main road. You can see, but you have to drive back into it. It's a lovely place. Just off of 77, Route 77. Keeps, you know, people take good care of it. They have an organization of multiple families who they're like trustees, and they manage the cemetery. It's currently still being used, which is great. The last real index of it, they don't seem to have that I can find a total list. They have a list of them, but there were 846 marked burials, okay? And that's in '83. And since then, The southern end of the cemetery has easily has gotten well over 100 more, maybe more than that. I walked it, I didn't count it, but it was a lot. So it's well cared for. Originally it was put together when Riceville was very large. They decided we need our own cemetery. It was donated by a local person, the land, and it was founded by Samuel Rice, and my memory serves me right. It was about 1840. It was started, and in the cemetery within a year or two was started. They don't have an exact date themselves, but given it really, for whatever reason, started and took off. So that's Riceville, and the veterans at Riceville, and I took the liberty of trying to define who's buried in the place. And interesting enough, there's over 120 military persons buried in Riceville. Interesting, the first war, 1812, was the first war. There was no Revolutionary War veterans buried there. Samuel Rice was interesting. He was an 1812 veteran, but they have him marked in the Veterans Administration organization as Civil War. Well, he died long before the Civil War. I tried to explain that to him, and they just didn't get it. So every year there's a little plaque that says he's a Civil War veteran. He's one of my great-grandfathers. So, great-great-great-grandfathers, I guess. Spanish-American War, there's two of them. World War I, 17. World War II, 50. Okay? Korean 6, Vietnam 1. Now, that tells us as a township, here in Western Pennsylvania, we just mind our own business, but when we're called for our country, we respond. And they're often forgotten. Or, doing Veterans Day and 4th of July, some of us may or may not think about how much sacrifice our fellow township citizens did. And it just wasn't the sacrifice of the person that went to war. It's the families left behind. Now, these are farmers. Who took care of the farm? Now, I understand they have, people tell me, they have a large family, but no, it's the wives, okay, that kept things going. So doing it, every one of these wars, the wives were heroes. Slide 14 is how it's laid out until the addition in the 1980s of the new part. What's nice about this plot, they do know quite a few of who's buried, even if there's no markers on it. Not complete, but close to. It's well laid out, well thought. Picture, slide 15, just gives you an idea of what the beautiful cemetery is in picture. 16 and other ones, and this is Ben Ruggles' headstone. and his family, or quite a few of his families buried there. I guess you can say that the Russells are still in Riceville. Yeah, he was born in 1868 and died in 1960. So he had a very successful and healthy life. Here again, pictures of several headstones, some of the older ones. The founder and his wife, Polly, Samuel Rice and his wife, Polly. In slide 20, it's one of the last slides I have there, it kind of gives you a real good picture looking north to south of it. And if you have it any time, it's worth just walking down from north to south, sort of in the center of it. It is quite pleasant and quiet. It's a great resting place for anybody. Now we're on slide 22, moved on to 22, the Bloomfield Shreve Ridge Cemetery. I'm not quite sure where they got the Bloomfield, but it's okay. We'll call it. Again, a beautiful sign. The Boy Scout Eagle Project has a nice sign underneath it. Slide 23 is the layout of this. Now, most of it's a narrow cemetery that runs north to south on the ridge. It's high up on the ridge, but on the western end of it, trees have taken over, and most of the grave headstones are gone. Very sad. And on the southern end, same thing. The vandalism at some point in time, it too was formed by the Shreves back in the early 1800s. It was close to a church, but it's not affiliated with the church. The church is gone. In fact, I understand it was moved to Lincolnville at one time, so that's another story.
Yeah.
Oh my. But anyways, here again, I'm not sure who's taking care of it at this point. There are a few fresh, new graves there, probably about a dozen, 20 at most now. Very well done. There's a couple folks that seem to be in charge of it, but it kind of, they are and they're not type thing. So, and they're, you know, like all of us, we get old at some point and we can't do some things we'd like to, but we can't anymore. So, if there were no trees between it and the lake, you could actually see the lake from there. So, I mean, it's, at one time, a lot of those trees were down. You know, those trees weren't there when the farming was the must, and it was almost the town itself up there. But very little history has remained to talk about it, so I wish there was more. Fairly well kept up, but it's sad that it's lost a lot of its markers, or you can't read it. But supposedly, here again, this was kind of indexed back in the 1980s. It had about 450 interned graves there, burials. Now, how accurate, I don't know, but The first burial that we could find is around the 1849 to the early 1850s. That's sort of the beginning of that. A lot of Shreves, and a lot of Wellmons. I've got two, I don't know, I'll have to look it up, but two great grandparent Wellmons and grandmothers. They came in the 1840s here.
Okay.
Farmers. And interesting here, they've got slide 25 is really, again, 1812, there's 4 veterans there. Civil War, there's 23 buried there. World War I, 2, 4, and Vietnam 2. And the cemetery was not used much in the 1900s. The folks mostly moved away to other parts of either the township or other locations. 26 is a nice picture of it. This is on the eastern side of the, looking down north to south, of the gravestones that are there. Slide 27 is kind of let you know now we're on the west side. I said there are trees and missing headstones, but there again, there's something about this cemetery. I mean, you see the color in the flowering shrubs there, and the serenity of being up on Shreve Ridge. It's quiet, birds. It is a very beautiful place to go. And I would highly recommend it to anyone. I know most people don't go to cemeteries, but I'm different. Slide 28 is one of my grandparents. He was in the War of 1812 on slide 28. Got the right marker and flag. The Richards were one of the first settlers here too. And I honestly don't know Richards myself now. So this gentleman was born in 1774. So, but they were, he and his wife were, they came here, I suspect, around 1800, 1810. But on a lot of the records, census records, early on, their name keeps popping up. So they are one of the folks. It's just a 30 is another. Caleb Shreve was very instrumental. He made out quite well in our township, particularly Lincolnville. He died in 1903, but he went through 3 or 4 wives, several of them trying to birth a child. Married one of my great aunts, so quite a my aunt's called Charity that married him. Yeah. So, the Shreve, just, they're old tombstones, and it's a lot of them old, and it's very unique. Additional gravestones. Slide 36 is just an incredible shot. Looking into the woods, and every once in a while you spot a tombstone with scrub trees, and there's a flag on it, which is quite stirring. All right, we're moving on now to Mount Pleasant, and now remember I said we were going to hit all these cemeteries, so I should pull that slide up to remind myself, but we're on the Mount Pleasant Cemetery. Okay, this cemetery is well organized. They have trustees that take exceptional care of it. In fact, personally know one of them. The people here, if you go to this one, it's unique in itself. The area there where the population surrounding it, we're back in the early 1800s, the mid 1800s, somewhat into the late 1800s. The population of farmers, it was a tough profession, really tough. I could never imagine what they go through to survive. Proud people, religious people, but very poor. But their headstones, and we'll see it in a second, and let me get to it, but it's exceptionally well taken care of. A beautiful arched wrought iron fence around it, and a gate. It's really nice. And it's on Mount Pleasant Road off of Route 8, so it's another one easy to get to and see. We almost go by it within a couple of miles each way. Veterans there, 2 Revolutionary War veterans. They're Shreves. One 1812, Shreve. Civil War 10, World War I 7, World War II 32, Korean 5, Vietnam 3, and Pacific Gulf 5 veterans.
Wow.
So well over 650 interred there. Here again, that's back in the 1980s. There was 2 gentlemen that went around and indexed all these. So here again, it's a reflection of who we are in our township. If called, we respond. Slide 41, just pictures of beautiful cemetery. Building next to it is part of an organization. Get mixed readings on exactly what it is. It looks like a church, but in slide 42, in this slide, you'll see these markers I told you about, only the name is on them. They're a small rectangle slate, basically stone, very thin, and they're on lines. And just their name, no dates, but they couldn't afford anything else. Nothing fancy, just a rectangle slate. almost like you put down your sidewalk or something. But beautifully laid, maintained. All right, Civil War veteran, one of the two is Richard Shreve, and he basically, brought this Shreve family here. He's buried there as well as other Shreves. In slide 44, 45, 46, gives you just an idea. Again, easy. You can actually drive through it if you want. And there's new, constantly new burials there. They've expanded that. They've added property onto it. It too is mostly, it started as a north-south cemetery, but just lovely. We'll move on. Western part of our township is Loomis Cemetery. And it's north-south. It's a triangle. Well maintained, exceptionally maintained. I couldn't contact the person who's in charge of it. Here again, it's an organization that takes care of it. Slide 50 is an example of certificate of stock to the cemetery. Made out to Earl Reynolds, but it's, you buy some stock, it gives you a right to bury your, in it. It's a newer cemetery, but again, sort of 1840s, to some, but veterans, 1812, 1, Civil 4, World War I, 5, 2, 8, Korean 6, Pacific Gulf 5, peacetime 3. So there's over, when it was indexed, over 290 burial there. And the on the southern end is all the new ones, and there's got to be 100 plus, maybe 200. So, but it's not a wide cemetery from being one that you visit for, the trees and the quietness. Not necessarily so, but it is a nice one, very nice. And again, I'm going through these quick, but just give you an idea. The Mr. Lewis and his wife are buried there, but that's about it. There's no other Loomis there that I could find. Now the one that closest to us is Bloomfield. And there, this is more of a rectangle, almost a square setup, just up our road here. It's the longest part of the rectangle is north-south. Unfortunately, the person that had all the detail who's buried here, their house caught fire and it was lost to the fire. And it was on a home very close to the cemetery. So, but we have 40 some that we know that's buried there. but we don't know where.
Oh.
And most of the stones have been vandalized, gone, taken, destroyed, or buried. So the veterans there, Revolution 1, 1812 2, Spanish American 1. And I'm not aware if anyone beyond the Spanish American War. So there's 4 identified as veterans there. I do have a great aunt that's buried there, but I wouldn't have a clue where she is. She's there someplace. And that's a burial ground. It's not a cemetery. The difference in that, if anyone's interested, is a burial ground is normally owned by an individual. It's not for a community or the neighborhood. So it's mostly a family cemetery. And from the records I could find, Thomas Bloomfield, who founded us here, is buried there, and most of his sons, the ones that still have markers, 3 of them that we could find and their names on it, is buried there. But no markers or wives, and so it's sad. But so others have been buried there for friends or neighbors, that kind of stuff. No fresh burials there because it's not open to the public. The township now is caring for it. Very appreciative of that. Back in the 1960s, the Boy Scouts took care of that. They met at the fire station, Bloomfield Fire Station. So it's it was a nice thing to have that. You've probably all seen it or noticed it as you went by. It's a nice, small, but very nice, and particularly the Bloomfield, like the 3 brothers. One was a doctor, and the 2 others, basically farmers. The Spanish American War veteran. I'm sure I'm getting records from to see how he died, but he died in 1898. Well, that's when we were fighting down in Cuba. So I believe he was killed in action. So I'm trying to find that out, just so we know that. I was surprised somebody from our township really, fought in the Spanish American War.
I know.
Yeah.
How far away was that?
Oh my gosh, yes. It's just unbelievable. Well, it's a true veteran. There's a few other ones I'm just going to mention a few things about that. There's a Lincoln Cemetery. The founder of Lincolnville, his lot is where the Lake Road and comes out to, it's called Main Street, but it's where Shreve Road comes down. Behind his house, there's 3 to 4 markers, headstones. He and his wife, another gentleman buried there. And that was his homestead, and there's many generations of Lincolns that have farmed that area there. So I mean, that's an important place, and
Yes.
it's on private land still, and it sits back a lot. But it's too bad it is, because you know, you have to ask the owners before you walk back. And he's not getting the recognition I think he should, because he did a lot for the community there. Beside Lincoln, he's got a daughter there, and he's got a porter there. And Porter is one of the farming families that originally came here too.
Oh.
Yeah. Those three are buried there. Now, this porter, she was only 8 months old, so I'm not sure she didn't carry any of the other names. The only thing I could get is Marion is the daughter of Seth Lincoln. Could have been his daughter who had a child, and the daughter died. I don't know. Not knowing her last name, I have no idea. I've asked umpteen people, and no one knows. But to have a porter buried there, because there is another area that the porters are buried at. But there's a Porter Blakesley Cemetery. There's 15 people buried there. It's basically abandoned. I put partially abandoned in this thing. I don't want to overstate, but the Porters and Blakesleys, they were here first too. They were one of those families have been here a long time. Bisbee's another family that's well known even today.
Yeah.
So, but they early 1800s they came here. We believe the headstone was moved to Shreve Cemetery, or lost.
Okay.
We can't find it at Shreve. We were told it was, but the body was not. So to find it now, yeah. There's a merchant farm cemetery, only one interned. There's a Fuller. Fuller's, he was early here too, but I'm not sure. I don't know of Fuller anymore in the township. So, and there's another one on private land. I tried to go to Taylor Boyd Hall Cemetery. It's on a private farm.
Oh, okay.
Off of Route 8, almost to our border to Erie County on 8. I have not been able to get to it. I will at some point.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are the other ones that are out there. The other day I got notice from a distant relative, a Shreve, that they were out dropping trees. You know, they're in the lumber business, and they came across a tombstone in the woods off of Shreve Ridge. Well, now they can't remember where it was. So they swore they'll get back to me where it's at, but this was last year. So, so with that, there are other family plots out there. We have no clue where they are. Either the tombstones are gone, or the people have taken it over all these years of,
Yeah.
you know, they're in the woods, they don't even know it's in the woods.
And I know, that's what my sister was telling you, that one that's down on their property.
That's right.
Yeah. So I'll have to go down there and some.
Yeah. Yeah, if you find it, I'd love to go.
Okay,
Take
yeah.
a picture. So I'm trying to keep this all together.
It might be Blakesley's, because that's who owned their farm for years.
I'd love to. I'd love to find it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Please, if your sister knew, no, I would be. I'd love to go with you.
Oh, Tim would have to go. He knows how to drive them.
All right. Well, that's it. Really, I appreciate everyone that came here today and spent time with me talking about one of my pet projects, the cemeteries of our township. So thank you for coming.
Thank
Baxter.
you, Baxter.
Thank you.
Oh, you did really good.
Yeah.
That would be hard to